lot of Americans dead down there too. I was wounded in Happy Valley, and it was a superficial wound, a piece of shrapnel on my arm. I continued to finish the patrol, which was another 6 hours or so. I didn't like it, it's uncomfortable, but the fact is I had to live by what I publicly declared. If you publicly declare what you're about, say I don't believe in being a soft man, I believe in being a tough guy, then you're going to be held to it. If you keep it in, I never keep anything in. I tell my men emotionally what I feel about them, about what I feel about our unit doing the job. And I never was let down by an individual, never. The American, fighting man can do it. It's just that he will take an easy way out if he can, because we're an easy culture. That's the way we teach our culture. We don't teach them to, run against the wall. We teach them to use ingenuity and everything. Sometimes in war, you've got nowhere to go except straight into the machine gun, and that's what you should do. The idea that modern technology is going to replace the infantry soldier or the special forces soldier is absolutely ridiculous. We in America have been very fortunate. We've been blessed with a wonderful country and everything, and wonderful resources. But don't let us think that we can be the world's top cop. And a lot of people will give the example of the big war as the Gulf War. It's a terrible example of a war. We took a long time to get going, all the big resupplies, months to get over there, months to get going. And the fight was in the middle of a desert, which is completely open. When you're talking about the future wars, we're talking about engaging in Los Angeles. We're talking about terrorist actions. Terrorist forces can tie up conventional forces, they can bring them to their knees. Good example was in Beirut, the Beirut bombing, and the more recent bombing, the Saudi bombings. We're talking about no specific groups, no specific religions. For example, the Muslims, people who blame the Muslims are honorable people. It's just small segments of fanatics and terrorists. And they may well be Americans, as we saw in the Oklahoma City bombing. Hunting down terrorists, this will be the nature of war in the future. Not great battlefields, not great tanks rolling. Military power is completely secondary to national will and national morality. The whole world would get behind the idea in the end. Individual freedoms are important, that the social contract between an individual and his government is a two-way street. But they will not get behind actions like Nicaragua, where we're backing the wrong people often, where we're supporting dictators for the thought of economic stability so that our foreign and domestic corporations can do business. And finally, I would say, there's a residue of hatred this is creating in these foreign countries where we're doing these things and we don't think there are any repercussions. Those people should think about the World Trade Center bombing and things of this nature. Things will come home to roost, and they may be 20 years later, of cavalier actions that we're taking now out there. And who is directing these cavalier actions? People who have never, in command and control, have never seen a shot fired in anger in their life, except hearing a round fired near the White House where somebody's mugging a tourist outside. We can't even straighten up our capital in terms of crime. We think we can go out there and be the world's top cop. It's impossible.
Everybody has a Rick Rescorla story, and I've got mine. I overheard him once talking to somebody else who was an aspiring writer. And Rick said, you gotta let the metaphors flow like shit off a wet entrenching tool. And of course, I'd already learned that lesson long before.
The next person that we're going to hear from tonight I have a particular attachment to myself because he was an officer in my company. But I'm going to let Joe Galloway introduce him nonetheless. So Joe, if you come up and do that, please.
Our next speaker is Second Lieutenant Rick Rescorla, Cyril R. Rick Rescorla. He said that that was all I was allowed to say about him, but he's wrong. Rick commanded a platoon in Bravo Company, 2nd of the 7th. They were bears on the line in X-ray. They jumped into Albany in a dark helicopter assault on a very hot LZ, led by Captain Myron de Durick, one of the great company commanders in any man's army. He's no longer with us. Rick Rescorla is a dream of a platoon leader as he waited in his hold for the enemy to come. He sang to his men songs to build strength, to strengthen them for what was coming. And I'm not going to say a lot more than that. Come on up, Rick, and tell your story.
Great to see all of you. It's like preaching to the choir and telling a war story to this group. And I don't have a doctorate in religion, but I'm not going to tell a war story. I want to tell you a personal story of an immigrant who came to this country looking for a home and found one, and started out that idea of staying here by serving with the 7th Cavalry and serving with a fine first team, the 1st Division. At Idrang, I was involved with 2 battalions, 2 very different battalions, with 2 very different commanders, with very different missions, with very different outcomes. But they had something in common. They had aspects of personal survival. They had men who would stand up and die for what they believed in, their own troops. They had patriots, and they had jailbait. They're fighting on the line together. X-ray, I'm going to call this one dedicated to the 1st and the 7th, and call it in the caption, "Oh, the wild charge they made." You take off and you get into a Huey, flown by strange, crazy individuals, robots. Robots with a name of Too Tall or Pop, Chiefy. Strange guys who would never speak to anybody below the rank of captain. Get on that strange steel beast and go into the X-ray, already a developing battle, and see the smoke rise and hear the sounds and the rotors quicken, and get put down there and put down hard. Bounce straight in like that. Jump out and watch another helicopter smoking, never get off the ground again. Go into the action with your men and see over here, there's a man, Sergeant Major Plumley, in charge of this strange little group, with another man on the radio there calling the shots. You get told by your company commander, Myron de Durick, they call him the Mad Cossack, but actually he had a heart of gold and will give you enough rope to hang himself. Go ahead, fix bayonets. You go back to the British background, because you were a British sergeant, and you give it this way. Platoon will fix bayonets. Fix bayonets! Well, you know, in training, that's where everybody growls. And what do now? They don't growl. They look at you and say, "Are you shitting me?" And as you enter the ditch, things change slightly for you, because the gung-ho aspect you had of this thing had now changed. You're looking at a man, American, lying dead, facing you. The ditch, sometimes called the creek. And around you, there are some wounded. And then you see an individual who says, I'm Tony Didal. Put your men along this line. We're going to hold. The light is changing. It's changing from into that twilight area. And you shove your men on the front end of the ditch, the leading end of the ditch. They say, the enemy is that way. But we've also got a platoon out there. The ditch is not a great place to be, really. You realize that, because ditches don't select fields of fire as if they were critical terrain features or anything. They follow the topical movement of the land, which is low. So you don't have a good field of fire, but you wait that night and you listen to a radio of probably a dead man out there fairly close, chattering away. And you got a sobering thought that the ditch stretches on beyond, along this way, and you have to go down it to alert your platoon using a strange little box, an intrusion detector they gave us with, remember that little thing with cotton wire and everything else, which was supposed to go off when somebody came in. And you put that down, and that's all you have on that flank. So it's a rotten night, and made worse the next day when you hear the gut throb of an attack going off to the southeast. A terrible attack, and you know that somebody's getting the hell knocked out. And by this time, the whole game has changed. And it's a more sobering experience for everybody there, and your men are looking about it. And there are no more gung-ho aspects of it. Another snapshot. Later on, you're moving towards in that area. They're sending you down there. And somebody drops napalm from above, and it's aiming for you. You turn and run with the rest of your platoon. The pucker factor is right there this time. And you feel the warmth and the heat hit you in the back. And you go down. Your medic gets up and runs towards the burning men. And he is immediately shot through the temple and he falls. And you move to him. And you hold him in your arms. And he takes a while to go. And you say to him, the only thing you can say to him, because you know he's gone, or he's going. His chest is heaving. You say to him, you're not alone, son. You're not alone. You're not alone. That's all you can say. And Tom Burlisle dies right there. Draftee didn't like the Army. Said, what have I lost in Vietnam? He didn't want to be in Vietnam. But he answered the call of his country and his commander-in-chief, and he went. And at the same time, I'm mentioning men dying. I'll talk about the platoon. I hope I get the pronunciation right. But Jack, also known as Lance Shahid, we end up in that platoon and we see those men there who are dead. And as part of that, there are two individuals there that I'm drawn to. One has a name tag, Gomez. And what has clearly happened, these men are locked together. One man has been wounded, the other man was being taken out. And that was what that noise was you heard in the morning. And they're locked together there, two individuals. Locked together, dying as brothers in that platoon, among the other brave men who died in that platoon. And they bought us the time. And I'd say this about all the men we encountered who died, especially the draftees. America owes a debt to them, and I hope the President-elect surely will remember what he owes to draftees, the men who answered their country's call. They went out there and they did the job, realizing a commander-in-chief represents his country. We owe a lot of things to those fellows. Jumping forward a little bit, you have a lesson in democracy, real quick, from a man called Hal Moore. Because you're there looking and you're interested in the bodies of the North Vietnamese that these brave men have killed and bought the time with. You're picking up souvenirs, if you will. And you hear a voice say, who's in charge here? You go over to this man, he doesn't have too much fancy badges on, but you realize he's the battalion commander. And you think you're going to get your blood chewed out, because you are wrong. You are looking at something entirely different. And he says to you, I need your help. These are my boys, and I want your men to help me send them home to their loved ones. And what do you say to that? You say, yes, sir. And you move, and you do it, and you carry them to the helicopters. You got plenty of time to prepare because of these individuals who bought time for you. And you go, and you do your preparation, your homework. You dig in. You have all those things that the American Building 4 down to Fort Benning tells you. You dig deep, the parapets and everything else, and you're ready. You have experienced NCOs, and God bless them. Thompson, Eschbach, a strange-looking guy, you know, wouldn't get in today because the uniform wouldn't fit too well. A skinny sort of a character who carries a canteen with a mixture of vodka in it and orange juice.